I've been working on Japanese cars for 19 years, and about 6 years ago I was invited to visit a Toyota Technical Center outside Nagoya. I brought along an American owner's manual for a Camry. When I showed it to one of the senior engineers, he flipped through it, stopped at the maintenance schedule, and looked genuinely confused. He pulled out the Japanese version of the same manual for the same model year, laid them side by side, pointed at the service intervals. The Japanese schedule was almost twice as strict. Some sections in the Japanese manual didn't even exist in the American version. He asked me if this was a mistake. It wasn't. That afternoon changed how I maintain every Japanese car that comes through my shop. The average Toyota sold in Japan routinely surpasses 400,000 miles. The same model sold in America struggles past 200. Same engine, same transmission, different maintenance philosophy, and buried in every Japanese owner's manual is a section that explains exactly how they do it. That section gets quietly edited or removed entirely before the manual gets translated for export, not because it's wrong, because it costs more to follow. And when I get to number 8, you're going to see exactly how much money dealerships lose every time someone follows the Japanese interval instead of the American one. If you want to know what the engineers who designed your car actually recommend, hit subscribe now. This information doesn't come from marketing departments. It comes directly from the people who built the thing. American dealerships operate on a specific business model. Maintenance is a low-margin service. They make modest profit on oil changes and brake pads. The real money comes from repairs, transmission replacements, engine rebuilds, timing chain jobs. The longer your car runs on minimal maintenance, the sooner those high-margin repairs arrive. That's not a conspiracy, that's just economics. So the maintenance intervals recommended in American manuals are stretched to the outer edge of what the components can tolerate before failure. They're not designed to preserve the car. They're designed to keep it running just long enough to stay under warranty, then let nature take its course. In Japan, the philosophy is completely different. Maintenance is seen as damage prevention. The goal isn't to wait until something shows symptoms. The goal is to replace fluids and components before they degrade enough to cause wear. It costs more upfront. It saves vastly more over the life of the vehicle. Japanese owners expect to keep their cars for 15, 20, sometimes 30 years. The manual reflects that expectation. The exported version reflects a market where the average owner trades in every 6 years. Here's what that difference actually looks like in practice. #1 Engine oil change at 5,000 miles, not 10,000. American manuals list oil change intervals at 10,000 miles for synthetic oil. In Japan, the same vehicles are maintained at 5,000 miles, sometimes less. Japanese manuals for the Lexus LS recommend oil changes every 3,000 miles under severe driving conditions, and their definition of severe is much broader than ours. They include short trips, frequent idling, stop-and-go traffic. That describes most American commutes. But the American manual classifies those as normal conditions and recommends 10,000 miles anyway. Here's why that matters. Synthetic oil doesn't just sit in the engine keeping metal from touching metal. It carries heat away from combustion chambers. It suspends microscopic metal particles so they don't score cylinder walls. It contains detergent additives that prevent sludge buildup on valve trains. After 5,000 miles, even the best full synthetic starts losing those properties. The additives deplete, the oil begins to thicken. Metal particles accumulate faster than the filter can trap them. At 10,000 miles, especially in stop-and-go driving, the oil is doing maybe 60% of the job it did when it was fresh. I've torn apart engines maintained on the American 10,000-mile interval. At 80,000 miles, they show visible sludge on the valve covers. Timing chain guides start wearing prematurely. The variable valve timing system, which depends on clean oil to function, becomes sluggish. Now compare that to engines maintained at 5,000 miles. At 200,000 miles, they look nearly new inside. The valve train is clean. The timing chain shows minimal stretch. The difference is dramatic. An oil change costs $60 if you do it yourself, maybe $90 at a quick lube place. Twice as often means an extra $90 to $180 per year. A timing chain replacement on a Camry V6 costs $3,000. An engine with sludge damage that needs a full rebuild starts at $6,000. The math is simple. Spend an extra $150 a year on oil changes. Avoid spending thousands on an engine that wore out prematurely because the oil was protecting nothing. You won't hear dealerships recommend the Japanese interval because they lose the repair revenue. And the oil change itself is so low margin that doing it twice as often doesn't make up the difference. Their incentive is to keep you on the American schedule. #2 Transmission fluid change every 30,000 miles, not never. Transmission fluid is labeled as lifetime in most American Toyota and Lexus manuals. The Japanese manuals laugh at that idea. They specify transmission fluid changes every 30,000 miles for most models. Some sportier vehicles like the Lexus IS recommend every 20,000. Here's what lifetime actually means. It means the fluid is engineered to last the length of the warranty period without catastrophic failure. It doesn't mean the fluid stays healthy. It means it stays functional enough that the transmission doesn't explode before the warranty runs out. After that, you're on your own. And most transmissions maintained on lifetime fluid start showing symptoms between 120 and 150,000 miles. Harsh shifts, slipping between gears. Delayed engagement. By the time you feel it, the damage is already done. Transmission fluid doesn't just lubricate gears. It operates under extreme pressure and heat to engage clutch packs and control shift timing. As it ages, it breaks down. The viscosity changes. It picks up metal particles from normal wear. Those particles circulate through the valve body and scratch the surfaces that need to seal perfectly for smooth shifts. Once that wear starts, it accelerates. The transmission begins to slip. Slipping generates more heat. More heat degrades the fluid faster. It's a cascade. I've seen Lexus RX transmissions with 370,000 miles that still shift like new. The owner changed the fluid every 30,000 miles with genuine Toyota WS fluid. Drain and fill, not a flush. Just drain the pan, replace the filter if it has one, refill with fresh fluid. I've also seen the same model transmission fail at 130,000 miles because the owner believed the lifetime claim. A transmission fluid change costs between $150 and $200 at a shop. A transmission replacement on a Lexus RX costs between $5,000 and $7,000. Changing the fluid 6 times over 200,000 miles costs around $900 to $1,200. That prevents a $5,000 failure. Dealerships don't mention this service because it contradicts the lifetime fluid claim printed in the manual they handed you, and because transmission replacements are extremely profitable. #3. Brake fluid replace every 2 years, not as needed. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. That means it absorbs moisture from the air. In the American manual, brake fluid replacement is listed as inspect and replace as needed, no specific interval. In Japan, it's replaced every 2 years or 24,000 miles without exception. Here's what moisture does to brake fluid. As the fluid absorbs water, its boiling point drops. When you brake hard, the calipers generate tremendous heat. If the fluid boiling point is too low, the fluid boils. Boiling fluid creates vapor bubbles. Vapor compresses. Hydraulic fluid doesn't. When you press the pedal and there's vapor in the lines, the pedal goes soft or straight to the floor. Your brakes stop working. That's called brake fade. It happens on mountain roads. It happens in panic stops. It happens when you least expect it. Moisture also corrodes the inside of brake lines, calipers, and the master cylinder. That corrosion creates more particles in the system. Those particles damage seals. Damaged seals leak. Leaking brake systems fail. I've seen master cylinders on 10-year-old Camrys that were never serviced start leaking internally. The pedal gets spongy. The owner brings it in. The master cylinder is corroded. It needs replacement. That part costs $600 installed. I've also seen Lexus LS sedans with 15 years and 250,000 miles on the original master cylinder and brake lines. Clean fluid, no corrosion. The owner followed the Japanese 2-year interval. Brake fluid replacement costs about $80 to $120. Spend $100 every 2 years. Avoid $1,500 in repairs. Dealerships don't push this service because there's no warning light for bad brake fluid. It degrades silently. By the time there's a symptom, you need parts, not fluid. #4. Engine coolant change every 30,000 miles, not every 100,000. Coolant in American manuals is often listed as lasting 100,000 miles or more. In Japanese manuals for the same vehicles, coolant is replaced every 2 to 3 years or 30,000 miles. Coolant doesn't just prevent overheating. It also prevents corrosion inside the engine block, radiator, and heater core. The additives in coolant that stop corrosion break down over time. Once those additives are depleted, the coolant becomes acidic. Acidic coolant eats away at aluminum components. The water pump, the radiator, the heater core. It creates pinhole leaks. Those leaks aren't immediate. They develop slowly. By the time you see a puddle under the car, the damage is widespread. I've seen water pumps on Tacomas fail at 90,000 miles because the coolant was never changed. The impeller corrodes. It starts leaking. Coolant mixes with the oil if the leak is internal. That destroys the engine. I've also seen original water pumps on Japanese-maintained Tacomas still functioning perfectly at 250,000 miles. The coolant was changed every 30,000 miles. The system stayed chemically balanced. No corrosion. A coolant change costs about $100 to $150. A water pump replacement costs $600 to $1,000 depending on the engine. Radiator replacements run $500 to $800. Heater cores are worse because the dash has to come apart. $1,500 to $2,000. Spending $100 every 30,000 miles protects the entire cooling system. Dealerships benefit more when you need a radiator, a water pump, and a heater core after the coolant turns corrosive. #5 Cabin air filter, replace every 12,000 miles, not as needed. Cabin air filters in American manuals are listed as replace as needed or inspect annually. In Japan, they're replaced every year or every 12,000 miles without inspection, just replaced. Here's what a clogged cabin air filter actually does. It restricts airflow into the cabin. Your climate control system has to work harder to push air through the blockage. That extra strain wears out the blower motor prematurely. Blower motors aren't cheap. On a Lexus, they run $300 to $500 installed. On a Camry, $250 to $400. The filter costs $15 to $30. A clogged filter also traps moisture. That moisture creates mold and mildew inside your HVAC system. You start smelling it when you turn on the air. That smell is mold spores blowing into your face. Some people develop respiratory issues. The fix is an HVAC system cleaning or evaporator core replacement. Those services cost $300 to $800. I've seen Lexus EZ models with original blower motors at 300,000 miles. The owner replaced the cabin filter every year like clockwork. I've also seen blower motors fail at 80,000 miles because the filter was never replaced and the motor burned out from overwork. Replace the cabin filter every 12 months. It takes 5 minutes. You can do it yourself. Spend $20 a year. Avoid $300 in repairs. Dealerships don't remind you about this service because the filter is tucked behind the glove box. You can't see it, and when the blower motor fails, that's a profitable repair. #6 Differential fluid, change every 40,000 miles, not never. Differential fluid is another lifetime claim in American manuals. In Japan, it's changed every 30 to 40,000 miles depending on the vehicle. The differential transfers power from the driveshaft to the wheels. It uses heavy gears under extreme pressure. The fluid lubricates those gears and carries away metal particles from normal wear. Over time, the fluid breaks down. It loses viscosity. The metal particles accumulate. Once the fluid stops protecting the gears, they start wearing faster. You hear a whining noise from the rear of the vehicle. By the time you hear it, the gears are already damaged. I've torn apart differentials on Tundras and Tacomas that were never serviced. At 120,000 miles. The gears show visible pitting and scoring. The bearings are worn. The whole unit needs replacement. That's a $2,000 to $3,000 job. I've also seen differentials on the same trucks with 300,000 miles that look nearly new inside because the fluid was changed every 40,000 miles. A differential fluid change costs $100 to $150. Doing it every 40,000 miles over 300,000 miles costs about $750 total. A differential replacement costs $2,000 to $3,000. Dealerships don't mention this service because differentials are hidden under the vehicle. Most owners never think about them until they hear the whine. And once you hear it, you need a replacement, not a fluid change. #7 Spark plugs, replace at 60,000 miles, not 120,000. Spark plugs in American manuals are often listed at 120,000 miles for iridium plugs. In Japan, they're replaced at 60,000 miles, sometimes sooner. Here's what old spark plugs do to your engine. As the electrode wears down, the gap widens. A wider gap requires more voltage to create a spark. Your ignition system has to work harder. Misfires become more common. Misfires dump unburned fuel into the exhaust. That fuel damages the catalytic converter. A catalytic converter replacement on a Camry costs $1,000 to $2,000. On a Lexus, it can reach $3,000. Worn plugs also hurt fuel economy. The combustion isn't complete. You burn more fuel to make the same power. Over 60,000 miles, that adds up to hundreds of dollars in wasted gas, and if a misfire is bad enough, it can damage the cylinder wall or the piston. I've inspected spark plugs at 60,000 miles. The electrodes are noticeably worn. The gap has widened. They still work, but they're not optimal. At 120,000 miles, I've seen plugs so worn the electrode is barely there. I've also seen engines maintained on the 60,000-mile interval run 300,000 miles with perfect combustion and original catalytic converters. A set of spark plugs costs $60 to $150 depending on the engine. Installation is another $100 to $200 if you pay someone. Doing it at 60,000 miles costs maybe $250 to $350 total. A catalytic converter replacement costs $1,000 to $3,000. Dealerships push the longer interval because spark plug replacement isn't particularly profitable. Catalytic converter replacement is. #8 Engine air filter, replace every 12,000 miles, not as needed. Engine air filters in American manuals say inspect and replace as needed. Japanese manuals specify replacement every 12,000 to 15,000 miles or once a year. A clogged air filter restricts airflow into the engine. The engine compensates by pulling harder to get enough air. That reduces fuel economy. It also allows more dirt to bypass the filter because the suction pulls particles through small tears or gaps. That dirt enters the cylinders. It acts like sandpaper on the cylinder walls and piston rings. Over time, that wear causes oil consumption. The engine starts burning oil. You have to add a quart every few thousand miles. Eventually, the piston rings wear enough that compression drops. The engine loses power. A ring replacement requires tearing the engine apart. We're talking thousands. I've seen Camrys with 200,000 miles that burn a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. The owner never replaced the air filter. It was packed solid with dirt. I've also seen Camrys with 400,000 miles that don't burn a drop of oil. Clean air filter every year. An engine air filter costs $20 to $40. You can replace it yourself in 60 seconds. No tools required. Do it every 12 months. Spending $30 a year protects your engine from wear that costs thousands to fix. Dealerships don't prioritize this because a clogged air filter doesn't trigger a warning light. And when the engine starts burning oil, they recommend a new engine. That's far more profitable than a $30 filter. #9. Tire rotation. Rotate every 5,000 miles, not 10,000. Tire rotations in American manuals are recommended every 10,000 miles. In Japan, it's every 5,000 miles. Tires don't wear evenly. The front tires on a front-wheel drive car wear faster on the outer edges because they handle steering and acceleration. The rear tires wear more evenly. If you never rotate them, the front tires wear out twice as fast. You replace them. 2 tires. Then 6 months later, the rears are worn. You replace those. 2 more tires. You've now bought 4 tires in 2 separate transactions. If you rotate every 5,000 miles, all 4 tires wear at the same rate. You replace all 4 at once, but much later. A set of 4 quality tires for a Camry costs $600 to $800. If you rotate properly, you might get 70,000 miles out of a set. If you don't rotate, you're buying tires every 35,000 miles and spending more overall. Rotation costs about $20 to $40. Some tire shops do it free if you bought the tires there. Do it every 5,000 miles when you change your oil. Dealerships don't mention this often because tire sales are profitable. Rotation isn't. #10. Serpentine belt. Replace at 60,000 miles, not 100,000. Serpentine belts in American manuals are listed as inspect and replace as needed or at 100,000 miles. Japanese manuals replace them at 60,000 miles. Serpentine belts drive the alternator, power steering pump, water pump, and air conditioning compressor. If the belt snaps while you're driving, all of those systems stop working instantly. The battery dies because the alternator isn't charging. The engine overheats because the water pump stops turning. If you're on the highway, this is dangerous. If the belt snaps and wraps around the crankshaft pulley, it can damage sensors and hoses. I've seen belts at 60,000 miles that look fine but have microscopic cracks in the ribs. Those cracks are where failure starts. I've seen belts snap at 70,000 miles without warning. I've also seen vehicles maintained on the Japanese schedule go 300,000 miles and never have a belt fail because they were replaced every 60,000 miles. A serpentine belt costs $30 to $60. Installation is another $50 to $150 depending on the vehicle. Getting stranded on the highway and needing a tow costs $200 just for the tow. Dealerships don't push this service because belts don't fail often enough to generate consistent revenue. When they do fail, the tow and emergency repair are far more expensive. #11. Fuel system cleaning. Clean every 30,000 miles. Not never. Fuel system cleaning in American manuals is almost never mentioned. In Japanese maintenance schedules, fuel injector cleaning is performed every 30,000 miles. Fuel injectors spray a precise mist of gasoline into the cylinders. Over time, carbon deposits build up on the injector tips. Those deposits disrupt the spray pattern. Instead of a fine mist, you get an uneven stream. Combustion becomes less efficient. Fuel economy drops, power decreases. Misfires can develop. In severe cases, the injectors clog completely and need replacement. A set of fuel injectors for a V6 Camry costs $600 to $1,000 installed. Carbon also builds up on intake valves, especially on direct injection engines. That buildup restricts airflow. The engine loses power. Fuel economy suffers. The fix is walnut blasting the intake valves. That service costs $400 to $700. I've seen fuel injectors on Lexus vehicles, with 250,000 miles still spraying perfectly, because the owner did a fuel system cleaning every 30,000 miles. I've also seen injectors clog at 90,000 miles and need replacement because they were never cleaned. A fuel injector cleaning service costs $100 to $150. Doing it every 30,000 miles over 200,000 miles costs about $700 total. Replacing a set of injectors costs $600 to $1,000. Walnut blasting intake valves costs $400 to $700. Cleaning costs less than either repair and prevents both. Dealerships don't sell this service aggressively because fuel system problems develop slowly. By the time there's a symptom, you need parts. Parts are more profitable. Hash 12 Battery and charging system test every 12 months, not only when there's a problem. Battery and charging system testing in American manuals is listed as test if there's a problem. In Japan, the battery and alternator are tested every 12 months as preventive maintenance. A failing battery doesn't always give you obvious warning. It might start the car fine 90% of the time, then fail on a cold morning when you're late for work. A failing alternator can damage the battery, the computer modules, and even the starter. When an alternator starts failing, it sends irregular voltage through the electrical system. That irregular voltage can fry sensitive electronics. I've seen alternators fail and take out the engine control module with them. That's a $1,500 repair on top of the alternator replacement. I test batteries and charging systems on every vehicle that comes in for an oil change. It takes 3 minutes. I've caught failing batteries that still started the car but were on their last legs. Replaced them before they left the owner stranded. I've caught alternators that were producing inconsistent voltage before they damaged anything else. A battery costs $100 to $200. An alternator costs $300 to $600 installed. Testing costs nothing if you do it during routine service. Getting stranded and needing a tow costs $200. Letting a bad alternator damage your computer modules costs another $1,000 or more. Dealerships will test your battery if you ask, but they don't build it into the routine maintenance process because it doesn't generate immediate revenue. The emergency repair does. Hash 13 Undercoating and rust prevention inspect every year, not never. Undercoating and rust prevention in American manuals isn't mentioned at all. In Japan, especially in coastal regions, undercoating is applied from the factory and inspected annually. Rust doesn't just make your car look bad, it destroys structural components, frame rails, suspension mounting points, brake lines. I've seen Tacomas with frame rust so severe the frame had to be replaced. That's an $8,000 to $12,000 repair. Toyota had a frame recall on certain Tacoma and Tundra models because the frames were rusting through. That's how serious this is. If you live in a region where they salt the roads in winter, your vehicle is under constant attack. Salt accelerates rust. It gets into every seam and crevice. Once rust starts, it spreads. I've seen brake lines rust through and fail. That's a complete brake system failure while driving. I've seen subframes rust to the point where suspension components tear free. Undercoating costs $300 to $600 depending on the vehicle and the product used. Done once and inspected annually, it prevents frame and underbody rust indefinitely. Frame replacement costs $8,000 to $12,000. Brake line replacement costs $500 to $1,000. Subframe replacement costs $2,000 to $4,000. Dealerships don't offer this because it's not in the maintenance schedule and it prevents problems they'll otherwise repair at great profit. Japanese Toyota owners view maintenance as an investment in longevity. They spend $500 to $700 per year on preventive services. American owners spend $200 to $300 and then face thousands in repairs. The Japanese owners drive their cars for 20 years and 400,000 miles. The American owners trade in at $150,000 because the repair estimates are too high. You now know what the engineers who designed your car actually recommend. You know why the American manual doesn't match the Japanese manual. You know exactly what gets quietly removed before export. The information was always there, it just wasn't given to you. Maintain it like the Japanese do or repair it like Americans have to. The choice is yours. Drop a comment and tell me what mileage your Toyota or Lexus is at right now and which of these services you're adding to your routine. I read every single one. And in the next video, I'm showing you the single fluid that most people never change that causes more transmission failures than any other factor. Miss it and you're looking at $5,000 in repairs you didn't see coming.